Today I'm speaking with Mike Amundsen. Mike, how are you, sir?
Hey, good to see you. Good to see you.
Tell me about your talk today. You talked about Node.js. How do you say it? NodeJS?
NodeJS. Some of the guys just say Node, like the super uber geeks, maybe.
Okay.
So, but I just say NodeJS.
All right, but there's a dot in there when you
Yes,
spell
there
it.
is. Yes, there is, definitely.
What is Node.js?
Node.js is a runtime for writing applications. Most of the people write server apps, but you can write client apps with it as well. Matter of fact, there's some really cool examples of very nice client applications written in Node.js or written in Node. Right now it runs strictly on the Linux platform.
Okay, this is when you say a runtime. Define what that means.
So it's sort of like the Java runtime or the .NET runtime. There's a core that's built and precompiled. It was written in C, and then you access that through a series of you basically script your calls into it using their function library. They expose objects and functions to it.
Okay, I can relate to that in .NET.
Yeah.
If I'm writing C# code, it's going to call onto the library assemblies that have the system namespace.
Yep, it's the same kind of idea. You think of that. As a matter of fact, in C#. You've got the using statement, right? Or in VB you got imports. In Node it's called require. So
okay.
I require the HTTP library or the file system library or the network I/O library. It's the same kind of idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
What language am I using to access these?
So it's the language they have is all JavaScript.
Okay.
Which is kind of wild. They sort of just picked a language. They had to pick a language that had a certain set of features. The way Node works is it makes some assumptions about how you write applications. It's totally based on a callback pattern and asynchronous processing. So they needed to pick a language that had this native support. So they could have picked Erlang or Scheme or some of these other really esoteric ones. They picked JavaScript instead.
Okay. Something about functional languages that I like.
Functional, and the big one is this notion of a callback or an asynchronous tool, which is really, really big.
Okay. And you said on the server or on the client. I've written a lot of JavaScript on the client.
Right.
I have never written a line of code of JavaScript on the server. That just seems funny to me.
It does seem funny, but if you think about it, I think we used to be able, using the old ASP, we used to be able to write our ASP as JavaScript. It could be VB or JavaScript, so it's not like it's the first time. No, I don't know if anybody did either. But it actually makes a whole lot of sense when you figure out the way Node is constructed and the way Node uses things. JavaScript is actually the best logical choice right now. And even on the client side, it's not like you're writing a browser application. You're writing, right now, command line applications using JavaScript. So you're not even building like HTML. There's no HTML involved here. This is just JavaScript.
So are we talking about no user interface?
Right now there is no windowing interface or anything like that on the clients. It's just command line applications or bots
or services of some kind.
Or services. And most of it right now is done as services.
All right, what kind of? Give me an example of some applications that would be useful.
Sure. Well, the classic case is a web server or an HTTP server or some kind of service, and this is where most of the people start with Node, and actually it's a really cool idea because what you end up doing when you write it, you can write a web server in Node in about 4 lines of code. What you basically do is you set up a function that runs every time a request shows up. So you actually set up a function and you get it started in what's called a loop or an event loop.
Okay.
And that's the way Node works. Node works on this concept of eventing. It's called eventing I/O, which is very, very different. It doesn't use threads to do processing. It actually uses a loop.
Okay.
And so you establish a loop, you do what's called a listener, and it waits, and when something happens, you fire off code. And that's exactly how you write it.
This reminds me, did you ever do Fox programming?
Yeah.
You remember the foundation read?
Yes.
Is that similar to that?
It's very similar.
I'm not sure if anybody watching this remembers the foundation read from Fox Pro. That just resonates.
Yes, that's very cool. Yes, that's the same kind of idea. It's the same kind of idea.
And this Node runs on Linux.
Yeah.
Only on Linux.
Linux, and it also runs on the Mac. You can install the Mac because Mac underneath it is actually a Linux operating system.
Well, why would I bother writing even a 4-line web server when there are so many web servers already on Linux? I mean, why not just Apache?
So you really wouldn't bother writing a 4-line web server because it's really kind of useless, right? Okay. So that's sort of the standard hello world kind of pattern,
okay, all right.
Right? But what you would think about doing, and the thing that fascinates me about Node is not the JavaScript, but the underlying pattern. So if you think about it, the way we've been writing web servers, the way we construct web servers underneath, the way ASP.NET works, the way the Apache server works, and these kinds of things, is we have these multiple threads, and when somebody comes in, we sort of put a request on a thread, and it executes whatever things it needs to do until it's done, and then it lets that thread go for somebody else to work on it. And you can have lots of threads running, and in ASP.NET, for example, you can actually turn on and off the total number of threads at any one time, and there's some tweaking. This works really, really well when the requests run really, really short.
Right.
So when you've got local files on disk, when you've got a locally reachable database, when you're actually just collecting up stuff from the local machine, those are really short requests. Mm-hmm. But the problem is in the last couple of years we're starting to do more and more sort of cloud-based kinds of things.
Sure.
My files are at Amazon S3, my data is at SQL Azure. Now when somebody makes a request, I have to go call out to another service, and I got to wait for them to answer.
Waiting is bad with a limited number of threads.
That's right, and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting. So now that thread is not only getting longer, but Ryan Dahl, the guy who put together Node, the guy who first coded it, realized there are a whole bunch of wait cycles that are being wasted. He said, how can I use all those extra wait cycles? So he flipped it around, and instead of doing requests on a thread, you do requests in a loop with a callback. So every function you write in Node has a callback.
Okay, so it's all asynchronous.
Yes.
Okay.
It's all asynchronous. They're stateless messages. You can pass arguments in, but it's a completely different way of thinking about the way you build your app. Now what happens if somebody makes a request and I've got to go to get files from Amazon and data from SQL Azure and maybe mash up Twitter and Flickr and all that kind of stuff, I end up firing all those off all at once.
And they're real short. They just kind of throw them over the wall, and
then
and later on,
whatever happens,
when the result comes
that's
back.
right. There's a callback that says, and when that comes back, I execute this and this and this, and at the end, I answer back. So you actually can get more throughput on a smaller machine, and because you're using a language that's built that way, it's a lot easier to code.
Is there always just one thread then?
You can have multiple threads. I don't know exactly sure what happens underneath the covers. You can also have multiple instances of the app running at the same time. Okay. So you can do lots of other things. But the key really is, how can I use those extra wait cycles? And that's what he uses the event loop for.
Are you using Node right now for any production or play apps?
I'm not using it for any production apps, but I'm using it for a whole series of demonstration apps. I think the last time we talked, I was telling you about this Hypermedia work that I was doing.
Fascinating stuff.
So I'm lucky enough to be working on a book right now on designing Hypermedia APIs with HTML5 and Node. So I'm actually using CouchDB, Node, HTML5, and every single one of those I can program in JavaScript. So the reader doesn't have to do any context switching.
Interesting.
So this has been really, 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 really exciting. So I've written about a dozen applications in Node, both client and server, in order to do this project.
Tell me about one of them. Just throw one about there. Besides the Hello World one you told me.
So actually, one that's not in the book that really fascinates me is you can write in about 20 lines of code a server that accepts uploads from a user. And it's infinitely easier. If you've ever written an upload service and you got the form and you got the file handler, this is really, really easy because it uses streams. Even easier, you can write the client that uploads a file in about 10 lines of code.
Okay.
So it's very, very interesting to watch, because what you're really doing is you're dealing with streams, inputs and output streams, byte arrays, and it's all done in JavaScript, so I'm not doing pointers or counters or any of this kind of stuff. When I do callbacks, I don't worry about function pointers. It's actually a lot of fun.
Very cool. Before you go, the book is, what is it? Tell me.
The book is,
what, where, when?
The book is called Designing Hypermedia APIs with HTML5 and Node. It's with O'Reilly Press. It's going to be out later this year, and it's really focused on the idea of how to write distributed applications using message design rather than a lot of URI construction, a lot of things that we kind of normally do. And so I'm finishing that up now. I'm very excited about it. I should be editing right now, and I'm not.
I'm in the same boat, buddy.
I got a letter today.
That's
Exactly right. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Mike, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. phrase I got to say.
Do it.
Right? So remember that your technology and friends may sometimes be asynchronous.
Perfect. That's great.